We, the jury, find the defendant, Antonio Armstrong Jr.
There's no question that we may lose some jurors in the course of a 7-week delay on this trial.
We have stood by our grandson's side every day since 2016. Everyone in the family fully supports him and believes in his innocence.
He has absolutely no emotion. He does not care, or appears not to care about the consideration of his parents.
The evidence is going to show you his demeanor that is such that there's no way to just execute his parents.
We are unable to arrive at a unanimous verdict without causing some members of the jury to do violence to their conscience.
This young man wants to go to trial. We want to go to trial. We've been pushing to go to trial. But unfortunately, because we're constantly getting new information, we have to continue to ask for more time to get prepared.
Kind of the all-American family, and that's why we're trying to do our best to get down to what's going on in this household.
On July 29, 2016, police were sent to a home in the Bellaire area. Antonio Armstrong Jr. told authorities he heard gunshots coming from his parents' bedroom. But the 16-year-old, commonly known as AJ, would become the prime suspect in the murders of his parents. He faced 3 trials over the course of 7 years before a jury found him guilty of shooting Dawn and Antonio Armstrong Sr. while they slept, 2 well-known members of the community. Thanks for joining us on KHOU 11+. I'm Len Cannon. The death of AJ's parents in 2016 shocked the entire Bellaire community. Let's take you back to the reactions from neighbors and family members.
They would talk to you, they would laugh with you. You know, they were just an average American couple.
Neighbors are trying to figure out what happened inside this townhome on Palmetto and Maple Ridge.
It's kind of the all-American family, and that's why we're trying to do our best to get down to what's going on in this household.
A family now dealing with a tragedy. Police responded to a call and found the woman and her husband had both been shot. She was dead. He is in critical condition with a gunshot wound to the head.
At the time of the incident, there were only 4 people in the home that we know of, the parents and the 2 children.
Friends tell us this family owns a Bellaire gym called First Class Training. It's closed, citing an emergency.
You know, because they doubted on the children. They doubted on the children.
Under the gym's online bio, the owner is married with 3 children, played football at Texas A&M, then played in the NFL for the 49ers and the Dolphins. Police say there was no sign of forced entry this morning, and although persons were detained on the scene, so far, no charges have been filed.
Everything looked like it was in place, so that's what we're trying to follow up on and figure out.
It makes no sense.
A senseless crime.
They're great people. They're people that, you know, I would trust with my life.
Then, news the last person relatives ever thought would be accused is charged in the shootings.
There was not any mark that they missed with their children. They did.
Vaughn Lee and Clifton Downing say the accused is the Armstrong's 16-year-old son. Dawn Armstrong was found shot to death by police inside the family's home on Palmetto. Paramedics rushed her husband of more than 20 years, Antonio Armstrong, to Memorial Hermann Hospital in critical condition with a gunshot wound to the head. Police say 2 of the couple's 3 children, both teenagers, were home at the time. There was no sign of forced entry and no prior domestic calls.
It's kind of the all-American family, and that's why we're trying to do our best to get down to what's going on in this household.
Friends and neighbors say the couple are pillars of the community. Antonio Armstrong is a former linebacker in the NFL who also played at Texas A&M. He's also a fitness coach and gym owner.
The sole purpose of strong talk is to motivate you.
And a motivational speaker and pastor.
They would talk to you, they would laugh with you. You didn't see any of the signs that there was a problem.
In early August 2018, Armstrong's lawyer asked the judge to dismiss the case, claiming the Harris County DA's office withheld evidence. That evidence allegedly included an audio recording about death threats made against AJ's dad.
This young man wants to go to trial. We want to go to trial. We've been pushing to go to trial. But unfortunately, because we're constantly getting new information, we're constantly uncovering stuff that wasn't turned over and people that didn't turn over to us, we have to continue to ask for more time to get prepared.
Jury selection for AJ's first trial didn't begin until March 29th, 2019. nearly 3 years after the murders. That day, the then 19-year-old walked into the courtroom surrounded by family. AJ had told police a masked intruder shot his parents. Days later, both sides made their opening statements.
At 9:52 on 7/28 of 2016, the alarm was told, we're safe, we're sound, we're here to stay, protect us from the outside.
But prosecutors in the trial against Antonio Armstrong Jr. say there's no way to protect Antonio Armstrong Sr. and his wife Dawn from the danger inside the home. Prosecutors say their son AJ walked into their room early morning on July 29th and shot his mom twice in the head and his father once. Both had pillows over their heads. They say police found no forced entry and motion detectors from inside the house caught movement that pointed to AJ as the prime suspect.
The alarm tells us more than just the killer came from inside of the house. The alarm tells us that the killer came from upstairs.
Prosecutors say AJ shot his parents between 1:09 and 1:25 a.m. before calling police at 1:40, telling them he had heard gunshots in his parents' room. But defense attorneys say Houston police focused on AJ as the killer immediately.
Within 11 minutes of going into that house, before any evidence was processed, before they knew anything about the crime scene, as far as forensics, before anything, they made up their mind, he did it.
The defense says there's no DNA or other evidence linking AJ to the murders. During the testimony, an HPD sergeant admitted another officer picked up the murder weapon, which may have contaminated evidence. The defense attorney argued police failed to follow all possible leads.
And we anticipate after hearing all the evidence in this case, you will find Antonio Jr. not guilty.
After 4 weeks of testimony, the case went to the jury. And after 19 hours of deliberations, the judge announced the jury could not reach a verdict.
We are unable to arrive at a unanimous verdict without causing some members of the jury to do violence to their conscience.
AJ showed no emotion with the announcement, but later he was seen with tears in his eyes. Meanwhile, his defense team said they expected to be back in court later that year because Harris County prosecutors would try AJ again.
It's a chance to put it in front of a different jury. And, you know, now we know that there's people out there that clearly don't believe, as Rick said, the state's version of events. And AJ, as strong as he's been this entire time, is going to remain strong on the next go-round.
Less than 2 months later, AJ was back in court. His defense attorney said they were ready to set a date for a second trial.
It's good to be away for a while, but we're ready to get back. We know this case inside and out, and we're looking forward to the second trial and showing 12 people that AJ is not guilty of this crime.
That second trial was originally set for October of 2019. Take a look. The start date for trial number 2 was delayed. Now, jury selection would not start for another 3 years. October of 2022.
Jury selection is underway for the retrial of Antonio Armstrong Jr., also known as AJ. Armstrong is accused of killing his parents, and he is now 22 years old, a father himself, but at the time of his parents' deaths was just 16 years old. 3 years ago, the case went to trial, but the jury was hung, and the judge declared a mistrial in 2019. After 3 days of deadlocked deliberations, AJ was charged with shooting his mother and father while they slept in their Bellaire home in 2016. Antonio Armstrong Sr. was a former Miami Dolphin who also played for Texas A&M. He was shot in the head alongside his wife, Dawn, who was shot twice. AJ told HPD he heard gunshots from his parents' room and blamed an intruder, despite police saying there was no evidence of that. The murder weapon was found on the kitchen counter, while prosecutors argue the killer came from inside the house since the alarm was on. AJ's defense team, we're told, is expected to bring about new evidence casting doubt against the older brother, who police never considered a suspect.
Fast forward to opening statements in the second trial. We find prosecutors telling jurors AJ and his parents had a tumultuous relationship, while the defense presents a different story, saying AJ adored his parents.
Prosecutors say AJ Armstrong had a bad relationship with his parents.
They were constantly accusing him of lying. He had failed out of school, and they were constantly getting on him.
A year before the murders, they say AJ tried to set his family's Bellaire home on fire just before his parents were killed.
There was a search on an iPad found in the defendant's room that says how to rig a car bomb so it will explode.
In the early morning of July 29, 2016, 42-year-old Don Armstrong and 42-year-old former NFL player Antonio Armstrong Jr. were both found dead in their bed with gunshot wounds. They had pillows over their heads. Prosecutors say Houston police ultimately determined that the couple's 16-year-old son, AJ, was the killer.
He has absolutely no emotion. He does not care, or appears not to care about the consideration of his parents. He doesn't even have questions for how all of this happened.
The evidence is going to show you his demeanor that is such that there's no way to just execute his parents.
Defense attorneys have a totally different story.
This is AJ in a Pee Wee football league about 3 years before the incident happened. That's his dad.
And they have a totally different theory.
Josh is extremely psychotic with command voices to hurt self and others.
Armstrong's lawyers say the killer was likely AJ's schizophrenic older brother.
Thought he was God. Thought he could fly.
They also claim there is no physical evidence linking AJ to the crime. Extended family members appear to agree, taking AJ's side since his arrest.
But this trial ended like the first, in a hung jury. KHOU 11 spoke with a juror who told us some of the jurors still had too many doubts to make a unanimous decision.
It's time to let AJ go. It's time to let this young man go back to his life.
The defense attorneys representing AJ Armstrong made it clear outside of the courtroom today that their client should not be prosecuted again. The parents of AJ Armstrong were asleep in their bed back in 2016 when they were both shot and killed. Prosecutors claimed AJ had a tumultuous relationship with his parents, especially his father, former Miami Dolphins football player Antonio Armstrong. They say AJ used his dad's .22 to kill his parents, and records from the alarm system company show nobody entered the home that night, that the killer must have already been inside. Defense attorneys said all of this was untrue. They claim AJ loved his mom and dad and that the alarm system was faulty. They also suggested the killer was possibly AJ's older schizophrenic brother, Josh.
And where is Josh?
Don't know. Ask the Houston Police Department.
One of the jurors we spoke with called these distractions, which ultimately led to a hung jury.
Everyone kind of had their mind made up, but it was very frustrating to hear everyone say, and I mean everyone, say, we know he's not innocent, but we still have doubt. AJ
Armstrong remained silent throughout the trial and did not testify on his own behalf.
I mean, can we hear from AJ at all today?
No, ma'am.
The prosecutors who tried the case didn't want to speak afterwards either. However, District Attorney Kim Ogg released this statement. Quote, we followed the evidence and stood up for Antonio Armstrong Sr. and Don Armstrong, who were murdered in their bed. It's unclear if the DA's office will elect to prosecute this case a third time. The family of AJ Armstrong, including the parents whose daughter and son were killed 6 years ago, have supported their grandson from the start. They're hopeful prosecutors decide that 2 trials were enough.
Less than a month later, the Harris County District Attorney's Office announced it would seek a third murder trial against AJ Armstrong. Prosecutors argued Armstrong had to be the killer because the house alarm never went off that night and there were no signs of forced entry. The defense countered the house alarm may have been faulty. And remember in the first trial when AJ blamed the murders on an armed intruder? Now his lawyers told jurors the gunman could have been AJ's older brother who had recently moved out.
We have stood by our grandson's side every day since 2016. Everyone in the family fully supports him and believes in his innocence and the charges. Our family thought and grieves.
AJ's grandfather stood by his grandson's side when trial number 3 began. Armstrong family members were emotional during the pretrial process.
Jury selection in the third trial of AJ Armstrong will begin next month. It's not what his family members wanted to hear.
Our family thought and grieves.
Our family has been through tremendous grief, anxiety, and pain for the last 6 years. We lost our beautiful daughter,
and our
son.
Yes.
Our family has been through so much hell behind all of this.
Back in 2016, Armstrong's parents, former NFL player Antonio Armstrong Sr. and his wife Dawn Armstrong, were both asleep in their bed at their Bellaire home when they were shot at close range with a .22 caliber pistol. Prosecutors say AJ, who had a tumultuous relationship with his parents, killed them after an argument. They say alarm company records for the home show he was the only person who could have been the shooter. Defense attorneys argued the alarm system was faulty and that AJ's older brother, diagnosed with schizophrenia, may have been the killer. Two separate juries have not been able to decide what is the truth.
This is ridiculous. This is a waste of taxpayer dollars. It's a waste of the court's time. They're putting this family through absolute trauma, grief, and anxiety.
Prosecutors did not comment outside the courtroom today. Armstrong's family members want District Attorney Kim Ogg to drop the case.
What evidence are they going to bring to this trial the third time? Or is the district attorney's office attempting to bankrupt our family? And will they just keep on trying?
In January of 2023, the case took another turn. Judge Kelly Johnson called for a change in venue for AJ's trial.
In a court document, Judge Kelly Johnson explained she didn't think a fair and impartial trial could be had in Harris County for AJ Armstrong Jr. The 23-year-old has been tried twice now for allegedly killing his parents. KHOU 11 legal analyst Carmen Rose says if approved, the motion will push back the timeline of Armstrong's next trial set for late March.
If this motion to change venue ultimately prevails, it's going to delay this trial even further. And it's going to be interesting to hear from the parties as to whether or not they would like a change of venue in this case, given that it will result in a delay as they start over in another county.
Ultimately, the courts decided to keep the trial in Harris County.
Obviously, that it would have been a lot of logistics involved, using someone else's courtroom in another county where they can't use their own courtroom, and the expense of everybody having to move. But we just believe, the state believes that the jurors, the people of Harris County, will give Mr. Armstrong a fair trial.
Jury selection for AJ's third trial started May 1st, 2023. It's been nearly 7 years since the murders. The jury selection process expected to take a long time. After the first two trials ended in hung juries, the jury selection process for trial number 3 would go through what's known as individual voir dire, a process where jurors are questioned individually, something that is rarely done in non-death penalty cases.
It's incredibly rare to have any criminal case end in a mistrial. It's particularly unusual to have 2 prior mistrials as we head into a third trial.
This time, jury selection would last 30 days. 6 women, 10 men, and 4 alternates were chosen. Opening statements for this third trial were not scheduled to begin until June of 2023. Judge Johnson said it was due to an unspecified issue outside the court's control. And 1 week later, just as opening statements were about to begin, the trial was delayed again.
For the second week in a row, a second delay in the third capital murder trial for AJ Armstrong. Our cameras did not capture Judge Kelly Johnson's announcement because she did not allow them in the courtroom.
I'm not allowed to talk about the case.
She's also not letting Armstrong's lawyers or prosecutors talk publicly about the case.
It's clearly a significant issue.
KHOU 11 legal analyst Carmen Rowe was inside the courtroom today.
Nobody seemed so surprised by it, but they were frustrated that this trial continues to be delayed.
Rowe told me it's unheard of to spend a month picking a jury for a trial, only to delay that trial for nearly 2 months.
There's no question that we may lose some jurors in the course of a 7-week delay on this trial. There are 4 alternates, and there's a good reason for having 4 alternates, as we can see.
It's a 7-week delay in a case that's now nearly 7 years old. Armstrong was 16 when he was charged with shooting and killing his parents, Dawn and Antonio Sr., while they slept inside the family's Southwest Houston home in July of 2016. Prosecutors say both alarm and cell phone records point to the killer being inside the house. But Armstrong told police he saw a masked intruder, and Armstrong's lawyers say there's no forensic evidence linking their client to the crime. Judge Johnson declared mistrials in both previous trials because of deadlocked juries.
I think this case continues to be one of the most unusual trials we've seen in Harris County in several decades.
Opening statements for AJ Armstrong's next murder trial finally get underway on July 31st, 2023. Then, prosecutors dropped a bombshell. Celestina Rossi, a nationally recognized bloodstain analysis expert from the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office, took the stand. She testified police found 2 bloodstains under an HPD visitor sticker on AJ's shirt from the night of the murder, and tests showed the blood came from AJ's father, Antonio Armstrong Sr.
I think that this evidence is probably the most important new evidence in this trial, and I think both sides are doing everything they can to convince this jury that it turns the tide, or that it's the most important evidence that they're going to present. Why? Because this DNA evidence places AJ Armstrong in the room where his parents were killed that night.
Closing arguments came in mid-August of 2023. This was the first time a judge allowed cameras inside the courtroom. Prosecutors told jurors alarm and cell phone records, inconsistent statements to police, and AJ's own actions before the murder showed he killed his parents. The defense accused police of zeroing in on AJ without ever looking at his brother Josh as a suspect.
Trenton Teamer, were you with Josh during those hours?
No, I don't know where he went. He was high, drinking.
Whatever the story is, figure it out. Don't come up here in a capital murder case and say it doesn't matter.
We talked about the gun, the test fire, trying to burn the house down. If that's not enough, his statements saying there was a masked man in the house. No, there's not. I know not to go to my parents' room. I know my sister's alive. This is not some kind of hit. Well, sure enough, this crime scene looks like a hit. Everything points to him.
The case was now in the hands of a third jury in 7 years.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Antonio Armstrong Jr.
Kind of the all-American family, and that's why we're trying to do our best to get down to what's going on in this household.
We're constantly uncovering stuff that wasn't turned over and people that didn't turn over to us. We have to continue to ask for more time to get prepared.
We are unable to arrive at a unanimous verdict without causing some members of the jury to do violence to their conscience.
They were constantly accusing him of lying. He had failed out of school, and they were constantly getting on him.
This is AJ in a Pee Wee football league about 3 years before the incident happened. That's his dad.
We lost our beautiful daughter,
and
my son.
Yes.
Our family has been through so much hell behind all of this.
I think this case continues to be one of the most unusual trials we've seen in Harris County in several decades.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Antonio Armstrong Jr., guilty of capital murder as charged in the indictment.
This time, there was a verdict. AJ Armstrong was found guilty of murdering his parents while they slept in their bed, ending a 7-year legal battle. Armstrong was sentenced to life in prison. He was sent to a state prison in Beeville, just south of San Antonio, in mid-September. But less than 1 week later, he was transferred to the Beto unit near Palestine in East Texas. Armstrong will be eligible for parole after 40 years. 7 years, 3 trials. Despite the verdict, AJ's family never wavered in their belief he was innocent. I'm Len Cannon. Thanks for watching on KHOU 11+.